Today I'm bringing you an amazing Supreme King deck profile. This is the best way to play Pendulum monsters in 2024. So if you're excited for the video or if you love Pendulum monsters, then make sure to smash the like button and of course subscribe to the channel for more amazing content. But with that being said, let's jump into it. I have a 41 card main deck, 15 card extra, and 15 card side deck, and honestly, I am thrilled to be bringing you this video because I love Pendulum monsters. When I first got into Yu-Gi-Oh, the first deck that I started building was Dinosaurs, and the second one was going to be Pendulum Magician Dragon. It was more so like a dragon variant when like Pisty and LP and stuff were legal, but either way. That being said, we have again our main deck, our side deck, and our extra deck, starting off with the main deck here. It's a pretty good list, and one of the things that I really appreciate about Pendulum, this specific version of Pendulum, is the fact that we actually don't need to play a ton of engine anymore. The fact that it used to be you need to play at least like 30 pieces of engine at least just to make sure that your combo would be consistent and you'd have the high power that you wanted. It's not the case anymore. So that being said, let's go ahead and take a look. Starting off, of course, we have the 3 copies of Supreme King Gate Magician. This card is incredible. It's a new card from Age of Overlord and has a few really good effects. First off, when it's in the Pendulum scale, it has an effect that only applies if you have Zark, which we're not playing, so we're not going to go over that. But while it's in the Pendulum scale, it's able to destroy itself and then place a Supreme King Gate monster from the deck into the scale itself, which is really good to be able to add consistency, and it pairs really well with a few other cards in our strategy. It does have 2 monster effects though, the first of which is going to be that while it's in your hand, if you have a Supreme King Gate Pendulum monster in your Pendulum zone, you can send from your hand or extra deck to the graveyard a Xyz Dragon, Synchro Dragon, Pendulum Dragon, or Fusion Dragon monster, and then you can special summon this card. So basically you're going to send a card from your extra deck, most likely to the graveyard, and then get a 3 body on the field, which is really nice. On top of that, when the card is special summoned, you can add a card that mentions Supreme King Zark from your deck to your hand, except for a spellcaster monster, so basically not itself. That being said, it's a great card. You definitely want to play this at 3 copies. In my opinion, there is no other correct ratio for this card in this specific variant. We are also playing not 1, but 2 copies of Supreme King Dragon Lightworm. This card is great. It does mention Zark, so it is searchable off of Supreme King Gate Magician. It's an awesome card for this strategy because it is the only tuner we're playing in the deck that is actually searchable and allows us to access the Synchro pool. And being a level 4 monster that is easily summoned out as well means we can access powerful rank 4s. And it's also a Pendulum monster that just so happens to be light, which plays into the fact that the rest of our engine kind of restricts us at least a little bit into light Pendulum monsters. I was considering cutting it from 2 to 1 copy, but it's so good in the grind game that you kind of have to play it at 2 copies in my opinion. Now what it does is that as a monster, if you normal or special summon it, you can take a Supreme King Dragon or Supreme King Gate monster that is face up in your extra deck and add it to your hand, which is really solid. And if it has another effect where if a face-up Pendulum monster is destroyed while this card is face-up in the extra deck, you can add this card from your extra deck to your hand. So it allows you to just recycle resources, which can be really impactful. Again, really solid, and it is a scale 8 as well. Its Pendulum effect doesn't come up because we're not playing Zark. We are also playing 2 copies of the OG Supreme King Dragon Darkworm with the 1 copy of Gate 0. Now Darkworm is great and a lot of lists are playing it at 3 copies, but I just don't find the need for it because we have so much easy access to the card that it doesn't really come up to have it at 3. Most of the time you're going to try and get it into the graveyard to use its effect to revive itself if you have no monsters. And if it's normal or special summoned, you can add a Supreme King Gate card from your deck to your hand. In this case, most of the time it's going to be Gate 0, or it can even be Gate Magician as well. And its Pendulum effect doesn't really come up because you're locking yourself into dark Pendulum monsters to be able to Pendulum summon out when you use the effect, and that doesn't really play into the rest of your strategy considering you have a lot of light monsters too. That being said, we also have the Supreme King Gate 0. This is the brick in the deck, and the reason why I'm comfortable going up over 40 cards in the list. You don't want to draw this card. You're most of the time going to be getting it off of Supreme King Gate Magician or off of Darkworm, but again, that's less likely nowadays because Gate Magician exists. That being said, not a card that you really want to draw that doesn't have a relevant effect. It's mainly going to be here just as a 0 scale that's easily summoned out and just helps us thin the deck out quite a bit as a pseudo Garnet. That being said, we are also playing the 2 copies of Wings of Light. This card is also amazing for the strategy. It is essentially Rhoda for any of these monsters. Any monster that is a Supreme King Gate or Supreme King Dragon monster will be able to be searched out by Wings of Light. The problem is, even though it's a quick play spell, it can only be activated in the main phase, which really hurts, and for that reason, you would think a Rhoda that is unlimited would be played with 3 copies. But no, because you can only activate it during the main phase, it plays into Droll, and it's also easily searchable, you only really need 2 copies, because if you're going to have Supreme King Gate Magician activate its effect to be able to search out any card that mentions a Zark, this mentions Zark. So you can search for it and get any other search that you really want to as well, because something like Darkworm doesn't mention Zark at all. That being said, again, you can play it at more than 2 copies, I just don't recommend it. Now, a lot of people are saying that you have to play 3 copies of Darkworm, and the reason why I actually don't play 3 Darkworm is because we have so much easy access to the card itself, and the reason why is because we are playing the 1 Foolish Burial as well as 1, 2, 3 copies of Dragon Shrine to be able to get it into the graveyard. Now, Darkworm has the effect where while it's in the graveyard and you control no monsters, you can just special summon it back out. And Dragon Shrine and Foolish Burial definitely help us with that. You want to play them because it helps us get access to the Darkworm. With 2 Darkworm and the 4 Foolishes, we have 6 ways to access it, which I think is plenty. And then our last miscellaneous card for the Pendulum side of the deck is going to be the 1 Astrograph Sorcerer. This card is insane. It's limited to 1 copy for a reason. We do not use its scale effect at all because we're not playing Stargazer Magician, but what it does is when you pair with something like Gate Magician, it's able to really pop off and get you an insane amount of advantage. So if you have Gate Magician and Astrograph Sorcerer in hand, you would scale Gate Magician, use the effect, destroy itself to place the Gate 0 in your Pendulum zone. Then you would use Astrograph Sorcerer to summon itself out because a card you control was destroyed, and then you would choose the Gate Magician and add another one from your deck to your hand, which is going to allow you to extend further and use the effect to special summon itself out as well. You have 2 level 7 bodies on the field, you overlay them for a rank 7 or a link 2 and you're good to go. So that's why I like the Astrograph Sorcerer. You always want to see it in your hand, it is that good of a card. That being said, that is it for our Pendulum monsters, our Pendulum adjacent monsters for the Supreme King archetype. Moving on to our next package. We are playing a package that is really good with this deck, and I've spoken about it before a few times, and this is the inspiration for me wanting to make this deck profile. It's going to be the Ostinato package or the Melodious package. So basically we have Ostinato at 3 copies with 3 Refrain, the 1 Couplet, and the 1 copy of Concerto. Now these cards are obviously fantastic, and I'll kind of explain a little bit of what they do. I don't want to go too in depth because I've made a really in-depth guide on how the actual engine works. If you want to see it, that video will be up in the cards. That being said, Ostinato is essentially branded fusion if you control no monsters, so you would send 2 copies of Refrain, which would be able to summon out a Baka from your extra deck and allow you to be able to start your combo. With that combo, you can end on an Appaloosa for at least 2 negates, a rank 4 of your choice, an Omni Negate in Vortex Dragon, a draw off of Concerto as well, and a scale from 1 to 9, which is amazing. Really, really strong what the engine can do. Refrain on summon allows you to add any Pendulum monster, any Melodious monster rather, from deck to your hand. You would add Couplet. Couplet, when it's added to hand, except by drawing it, it's basically Poplar, where you can reveal it and special a level 4 or lower Melodious from your graveyard or your hand, which allows you to start your plays. And then they do have effects in the Pendulum scales as well, where Refrain is basically Foolish Burial, and then Couplet is going to allow you to add a Melodious spell or trap if you control only Melodious monsters. Concerto is polymerization for fairy type monsters, but you can use monsters in your scale as well, and if a fusion is sent, if a Melodious fusion rather, is sent from your sent to the graveyard, you can bottom deck it and then draw a card as well, which is going to be really nice to be able to get additional card advantage. So that's going to be our little Melodious package. We do lock ourselves into Pendulum summoning light monsters with the cards in the Melodious engine, but that doesn't matter because a lot of the monsters in our deck are lights. Now, if you've been counting along, that is 23 pieces of engine. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about our non-engine, and I'm going to speed through this part just a little bit because it's very dependent on what your local scene is looking like. But I would recommend that you play 3 copies of Crossout Designator. This card is amazing. Everyone should have access to it now that Rarity Collection 2 is out. It's a great card to be able to give you a way to protect yourself from hand traps, which are going to be very common in this format. We're also playing, of course, the 3 copies of Ash Blossom and 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence as well. These are the 2 best hand traps in the format, in my opinion, bar none. They're able to just do a lot of really good things, and by having Imperm and Ash Blossom with Crossout to protect yourself from them, it's going to allow you to kind of play through almost anything, which is really, really nice. We're also playing 2 copies of Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, and 2 copies of Effect Veiler, with 2 copies of Droll and Lockbird, and 2 copies of Triple Tactic Talents with the 1 Call by the Grave. So these 8 cards here are essentially going to be our other cross-out targets. They all have ways where they impact us pretty significantly. For example, going for Ghost Ogre on one of your scales can hurt quite a bit, so protecting that with cross-out is nice. Valor again on something like a Baka could be really annoying. It could be really annoying on many different cards you have access to, especially if you're trying to play through Nibiru. If they have Nib plus Valor, it could hurt you a lot. Droll is important because we do a lot of searching in this deck, so having the cross-out to protect the Droll is great. And triple tactic talents we play because we are ending on Appaloosa, and if we're in a situation where our Vortex Dragon has already been used and they go for talents to take our Appaloosa, then we're having to play through 2 monster negates as well, which really hurts us. And then Call By is just our 41st card, basically our 4th copy of Crossout Designator. Again, you can adjust the ratios for the non-engine that you want. I would just highly recommend that you play a Crossout package in this list because it is really, really important. That being said, let's move on to our extra deck. We have, of course, our 2 copies of Baka as our main card to summon off of the Ostinato. Really good monster, requires 2 Melodious cards. Essentially, when it's summoned, it's going to be E-Telly, where you can special summon a Melodious from your deck. It also has the effect where the activated effects of your Melodious fusion monsters can't be negated while it's on the field. So for example, this card can't be negated with Ash Blossom because Ash Blossom would negate the activation, or the effect rather, I should say, of a Melodious fusion monster, which means you can protect it. Other than that though, when it's sent to the graveyard, you can target any Melodious other than itself and special summon it, which is really good to get an extra body on the field. And that's when it's sent to the graveyard. So it could be just like an Xyz material and sent to the graveyard. It can be sent to the graveyard from the extra deck, from wherever. It's a really solid option. We also have the 1 Vortex Dragon, and to pair with that, we have the Absolute Dragon. This card is great. It helps you chain block. It helps you get your Vortex Dragon on the field as an Omni Negate, and it's easily made because it's a generic rank 7 monster. You can make this with the 2 Baka, you can make this with the Astrograph Sorcerer and the Gate Magician as well, which is great, and then Vortex Dragon is your Omni Negate. It also has another effect where if it's summoned as Chainlink 1, then you can target a card your opponent controls and then return it to the hand, which ends up being pretty nice. We're also playing the 1 Odd Eyes Rebellion Xyz Dragon. This card, you don't really summon it. It is a generic-ish 7 in this deck because all of your 7s other than Baka are going to be Pendulum monsters. And it does have some nice effects in terms of like popping 2 monsters out of 3,000 or less attack, but most of the time, this is the card you're going to send to the graveyard to special summon out the Supreme King Gate Magician. So again, it doesn't come up too often. That being said, we also have our rank 4s now. We have the 1 Abyss Dweller and the 1 Baguska. Both these cards are great, and I think that Abyss Dweller is mandatory in this format because there's so many good graveyard effects. Promethean Princess, Flamber's Dragon, just to name a few. And then Baguska, if your combo gets interrupted and you want to end on something like Appaloosa plus Baguska, you can definitely do that and put in a lot of pressure on your opponent. That being said though, we also have our 1 copy of Adamancipator Risen Dragite. This card may seem a little bit out of place. It is a generic level 8 synchro monster that has a spell and trap negate if you have a water monster in your graveyard. And what water monsters do we play? Well, we have the Abyss Dweller, but more notably, we have the Absolute Dragon, which will almost always be sent to the graveyard as part of our combo. So as long as we're not under Shifter or something, we have a spell trap negate, which is amazing. Moving on though, we have our links. We have the 1 copy of IP and the 1 SP. SP is the only card in the deck that is expensive right now. And I get expensive is a subjective term, but SP right now is the card that makes this deck not budget. So if you're looking to play a budget deck, this is an amazing option. The only concern you should have is going to be that SP, you need to replace it probably with Nightmare Unicorn. That being said though, we also have our other Link 2s in Beyond the Pendulum. We have a Link 3 in Exceed the Pendulum. We have Selene, Access Code Talker, and Appaloosa. Now, Beyond and Exceed are part of your combo. This lets you get any Pendulum monster. This lets you special a Pendulum monster from your hand if you have the scales for it, and then Selene helps you OTK with Access Code Talker. It's not mandatory. I'd recommend it, but if you don't want to play it, you don't have to. There are other alternatives, like for example, Cross Sheep, and then Appaloosa is part of your end board most of the time. So that's going to be our 15 card extra deck. Again, really solid here. You have a couple of flex spots as well, but I do recommend this specific build over here. Then for the side deck, we have 3 copies of Evenly Matched. I love Evenly. This format is just, there are certain decks that I play that it's really bad with, like for example, Tenpai Dragon. But in this specific deck, it's great because you can't play through a ton of negation. So having Evenly Matched to be able to bait out negation is really nice, and you can build your board up and prevent them from being able to recover back the next turn with all of your negation. We also have 3 copies of Forbidden Droplet, another amazing card in this deck because we get a lot of card advantage, and you can always send your scales to the graveyard if you really want to be able to add extra benefits for yourself, and this does pair really well with Evenly Matched as well. We then have our back row hate. We have the 2 copies of Cosmic Cyclone with our 1 Harpy's Feather Duster as well. Again, I think these 3 cards are pretty much mandatory. You can replace Duster for another Cosmic Cyclone, but I like the Duster in this deck right now, so I'm going to keep it here. We also have 3 Lava Golem. Now, Lava Golem is a little bit of an interesting choice in this deck, and the reason why we play it is because you don't need your normal summon in this strategy at all. You also can't really play Nibiru because 2 of your effects in Ostinato and in Darkworm, they're your 2 best starters really, need to have no monsters on the field to activate the effect. So, Lava Golem allows you to be able to get rid of 2 bodies, give your opponent a monster that is kind of useless to them, and be able to act as removal while not covering up your field. The problem is, it is a fire. That hurts. There's no doubt about that. It really hurts because they can just pop it with Promethean Princess and summon itself back. But again, it's better than playing Sphere Mode. And the reason why is, first off, Sphere Mode, if they don't go wide where they have a ton of monsters on the field, then Sphere Mode is kind of dead. But second, Sphere Mode can't be attacked or targeted with card effects. And a lot of this deck targets with card effects and needs to attack over for that reason. So it becomes a little bit problematic to beat those cards. That being said, Lava Golem is a great choice. We're also playing as another crossout target. We have D-Barrier here in case we have to worry about something like D-Barrier on ourselves. And I'm playing the 3rd Droll and the 3rd copy of Ghost Mourner, or Ghost Ogre rather, in this strategy as well. Again, your side deck should be up for consideration depending on what your local scene is like. For me, this makes a lot of sense, so I'm going to stick with it for the time being. That being said, that is going to be our Pendulum Supreme King deck profile. Let me know what you guys thought about the list down in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. I feel like the list itself is very solid. It's not really missing much, and the best part about this is the deck is incredibly budget. The engine itself, you're able to play it and build it for like, what, $50, $60 around that range, which is amazing. And if you're considering playing competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! And you don't know what to start with, this is a great choice. Also, let me know what you think about the new setup I have for the deck profiles. I want to get your opinion about how the channel is kind of progressing and what I can do to improve the content here. And I feel like adding in a camera to the deck profiles may add a little bit extra to it. That being said, I know the camera for this isn't as crisp as my phone camera, but I think for the time being it gets the job done, so just let me know what you guys would prefer down in the comments. A couple of notes here as well. You can play the Zark package, but I don't really recommend it in this current format. It just doesn't seem as impactful as a pure Supreme King deck that just utilizes the bodies to get really powerful extra deck plays, so I'd rather this variant than the Zark version. With that being said, if you enjoyed the video, then make sure to smash the like button and of course subscribe to the channel as well for more amazing competitive Yu-Gi-Oh videos. And if you want to see a combo guide for this deck, then again, leave a like on the video. If we hit 250 likes, I'll bring you that combo guide. Thank you for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next time.